Welcome to another Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a massive, honestly kind of mind-blowing paradigm shift regarding humanity's actual place within the natural world. Look, if you've ever looked around at the concrete, the smog, or just the endless news cycle of climate disasters and felt like, our modern relationship with nature is fundamentally broken, well, you are definitely not alone. The stakes right now are absolutely crucial. We aren't just talking about saving a few trees here, we're talking about totally tearing down and rebuilding the core philosophy of what it actually means to be human on this planet. So we're going to explore some radical ideas from philosophy, ecology, and ancient traditions to completely reframe how we view our existence.
So, let's start with a really provocative question straight from the source material. Does the Earth actually need us to survive? The answer is a resounding, unapologetic no. Actually, scratch that, it would probably thrive in spectacular fashion without us. I mean, think about it, the Earth did perfectly fine for billions of years before a single hominid ever walked the plains. If just one species of pollinating insect were to suddenly disappear today, entire vast ecosystems could literally collapse overnight. But humans, biologically speaking, we're entirely expendable to the planet's survival. It's a stark, definitely humbling realization, but it immediately challenges our everyday human-centered bias and sets the perfect stage for a totally different way of thinking.
All right, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The human-centered illusion. 2. Deep ecology and indigenous wisdom. 3. Spinoza's web of life. 4. Enter the dark ecology. 5. Confronting the hyperobject. And 6. A new coexistence. We're going to progressively zoom out from the individual human ego all the way to massive, incomprehensible, global scales.
Okay, Section 1. The human-centered illusion. To really grasp this philosophical shift, we first need to define the exact lens modern industrial society uses to view the world.
And that lens is called anthropocentrism. It's basically this deeply ingrained belief that we, human beings, are the absolute center of the universe. The main characters in the story of reality, right? Under this ideology, nature is just seen as an infinite resource waiting to be extracted. It's exactly how industrial capitalism turns incredibly complex ancient ecosystems into nothing more than commodities. Instead of seeing a massive, breathing forest full of interconnected life, this mindset looks at those trees and just sees, well, board feet of lumber and profit margins. And the source material points out that this precise, human-first mindset is the exact engine fueling our current ecological crisis.
Which brings us to the failure of what philosopher Arne Naess called shallow environmentalism. This is the kind of greenwashing we see literally every day. Like a massive corporation planting a single tree in a parking lot while continuing to pump toxic waste into a local river. It might promote recycling or saving a scenic view, but fundamentally, it still prioritizes humans as the rulers and managers of nature. It totally severs that human-nature bond. Now contrast this directly with the much more foundational concept of deep ecology. Deep ecology argues that human beings have absolutely zero supreme privilege. We aren't the managers, we're simply an integral, equal part of a wildly complex natural environment.
Moving on to Section 2, Deep Ecology and Indigenous Wisdom. Let's see how this modern theory builds on ancient traditions. The earth and myself are of one mind. The measure of the land and the measure of our bodies are the same. Wow, that incredible quote from Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce tribe beautifully captures the indigenous spiritual belief that all objects, living and non-living, are deeply interwoven. It's a profound rejection of the idea that humans are physically separate from or intellectually superior to the dirt they stand on. You are the land, and the land is you.
When you look at indigenous narratives from Canadian First Nations to Australian Aboriginal cultures, you see an entire worldview built around this exact interconnectedness. They see the environment as a bustling community that they actively belong to, not some warehouse to be raided. Kind of puts our modern daily routine into perspective, doesn't it? Where we usually only interact with nature when it inconveniences our commutes or ruins our weekend plans. These narratives emphasize a deep recognition of the spirituality inherent in all natural elements, from rocks to rivers, advocating for a sustainable coexistence that is exactly what deep ecologists are arguing for today.
Next up, Section 3, Spinoza's web of life. To understand why this isn't just poetry, but almost a physical law, we have to look at 17th century philosopher Baruch Spinoza.
Okay, Spinoza's metaphysics can be a bit dense, but it's incredibly rewarding if we break it down. He argued there's only one true substance in the universe, existing entirely in itself, which he called God or nature. Everything else, including you and me, is just a mode. The easiest way to wrap your head around this is to imagine the ocean. The ocean itself is the underlying substance. The individual waves rolling across the top, those are the modes. A rock, a tree, a human, we are all just different waves on the exact same ocean. Spinoza's absolute game-changer of an idea is that humans hold no privileged place in the cosmos. We're just temporary expressions of the exact same reality as the stones on the ground.
He also introduced this concept called kanatis. Kanatis is the inherent striving of every single thing to persist and endure. Every entity, human or not, possesses this fundamental drive to exist completely independent of its usefulness to us. Think about a dandelion weed relentlessly pushing its way up through a tiny crack in a solid concrete sidewalk. That is kanatis right there. It doesn't care about human city planning, it just strives to exist simply to fulfill its own purpose as a mode of nature.
Now, this philosophy sounds super beautiful and harmonious when we're picturing majestic deer and ancient redwoods, but what if nature isn't just beautiful forests and rivers? If everything is connected and everything has an equal right to exist, we have to confront something pretty uncomfortable. Nature includes the weird, the toxic, and the downright terrifying. If we're fully connected to nature, that means we're directly connected to the mosquito buzzing in your ear, parasitic viruses, and the billions of gut bacteria currently digesting your lunch. So, how do we fit the parts of nature that actively harm or disgust us into this web of life?
Which brings us to Section 4, Enter the Dark Ecology. Here we strip away the romanticization of the environment. Contemporary philosopher Timothy Morton argues that we need to stop thinking of nature as this pristine, serene picture hanging in a frame. Instead, everything is causally entangled in what he calls the mesh. There are no fixed, clear-cut boundaries between individual entities. Your physical boundaries are incredibly porous. Think about it. The oxygen you just breathed in instantly became part of your bloodstream, and the microplastics floating in the local water supply, they're probably resting inside your tissues right now. The mesh forces us to realize we're physically embedded in a vast system we simply cannot escape, no matter how many HEPA filters we buy. A great way to visualize the mesh is like an underground mycorrhizal fungal network, sometimes affectionately called the Wood Wide Web. Down in the forest dirt, these fungi connect the roots of trees, creating a massive living internet that exchanges nutrients and information across miles and miles. Trees can literally communicate danger to one another through these fungal pathways. If a tree gets attacked by bugs, it sends chemical warnings through the network so that trees next door can mount a defense. It's a perfect example of how things constantly interact on a micro level to create massive macro effects. We're all permanently plugged into this planetary network. Zooming out even further, we hit Section 5, Confronting the Hyperobject. Things are about to get really huge.
As we realize we're trapped in this mesh, we start running into phenomena that our human brains genuinely struggle to even comprehend. Morton calls these overwhelming things hyperobjects. We're talking about global climate change, nuclear radiation, or the microplastics in our oceans. They are very real and they physically surround us every second of the day, but they totally defy simple human perception. You can't just point to climate change in a room, you only see the local weather. A hyperobject is so massively distributed across time and space that it becomes almost ghost-like. It touches everything, yet it's way too enormous and complex for us to ever view the whole shebang at once.
To really put the scale of a hyperobject into perspective, let's look at some numbers. The average human lifespan is roughly 80 years, right? Now, compare that to a single piece of styrofoam packaging from a takeout container. That takes about 500 years to decompose. Or consider the lasting impact of nuclear radiation, stretching tens of thousands of years into the future. When you compare our incredibly brief, limited existence to the massive life cycles of these hyperobjects, our traditional belief that we can just engineer or manage our way out of these systems becomes terrifyingly false. Finally, Section 6, A New Coexistence. How do we actually move forward with all this? Since we can't just forcefully manage these massive, dark ecological forces, and since we're just equal nodes in an infinite mesh, we have to transition from a mindset of absolute dominance to a completely new way of living. The first, and honestly hardest step, is abandoning the illusion of human control. But letting go of that, it can actually be really freeing. Instead of carrying the weight of being the masters of the universe, we can just accept that ecological crises come with inherent uncertainty. We gotta stop looking for quick, magical tech fixes for systems that are infinitely complex. By acknowledging the agency of non-human entities, forests, rivers, the climate itself, we can adopt a humble, long-term, and truly cooperative stance toward the Earth. We have to learn to live with the mesh, not above it. Ultimately, finding our actual place in this complex web requires us to sit comfortably with a lot of uncertainty.
It challenges us to stop trying to conquer the natural world, and instead realize we are just one small, fragile thread in a much larger, sometimes terrifying tapestry. Which leaves us to wonder just how deeply our daily choices ripple out into the unknown of the mesh. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Next time you step outside, I want you to look around and ask yourself, are you looking at nature, or are you finally realizing that you are nature? So, what does this all mean for you? Are you ready to embrace the dark?